All right. Hi, everybody. We're going to get going right away. We are really excited that you're all here. So, welcome everybody to Nest Speaker Series, where today we're going to be speaking with Joanna Schroeder and Christopher Pepper, who are the co-authors of Talk to Your Boys. My name is Allison Blair. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the programs manager for Nest. So if you are new to Nest, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. If you have been to some of our sessions before, welcome back. Or if you are currently implementing our programming, hello and welcome back. So for anybody that's new to Nest or wants to learn more, we've been working for about 20 years now, delivering educational programming that helps young people to build skills that protect their mental health and prevent harm, interpersonal relationship harm. And we're teaching them things like emotional awareness, empathy, and skills on how to connect and have healthy relationships. So our work really centers a lot on what it means to be a kid and grow up in a world that often feels really disconnected, and how we can give them the tools to navigate that with compassion and with confidence so that they can have really fulfilling relationships and lives. We recently launched a new program called Blueprint for Connection Human Voices, which focuses on helping young people and the adults who support them relearn how to listen to each other, to share stories, and to build meaningful relationships. And that is why we were so excited when we came across Joanna and Christopher's book, because we feel like it aligns so beautifully with what we do, especially the focus on helping boys and young men to really develop those skills and become confident, compassionate, and healthy adults. So if you'd like to learn more about Nest programming, I'm going to drop some stuff in the chat for you. You can always reach out to us. I'll drop my email address in so you can reach directly out to me, or you can just go take a look at our website. So now I'm going to do a little housekeeping. Live transcription has been turned on for this session, so you can access the subtitles or the full screen transcript from the menu bar below. There will be a Q&A towards the end of the hour, so if you have any questions for the panelists, please don't wait until the end. Feel free to drop them in, while we're talking, and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. All right, now here we go. So as I mentioned before, we're really, really excited and feel so privileged to have Joanna Schroeder and Christopher Pepper here with us today. They are the co-authors of Talk to Your Boys, 16 Conversations to Help Tweens and Teens Grow into Confident, Caring Young Men. Talk to Your Boys is an essential guide for parents and just adults who work with kids who want to raise emotionally aware, compassionate boys in a culture that doesn't always make that super easy. It's really incredibly built around 16 key conversations, topics like friendship, consent, identity, emotions, digital life, and it gives folks practical scripts and real practical strategies for opening up meaningful dialogue. Joanna is a writer, editor, and media critic whose work has appeared in the New York Times, Esquire, and Good Housekeeping. She studied gender studies at UCLA and previously served as the executive editor at the Good Men Project. Her viral essay on how boys are influenced by online extremism sparked a national conversation about how we guide young men in today's digital world. Christopher Pepper is a longtime health educator and curriculum developer in the San Francisco Unified School District. He created Be Real, Be Ready, an inclusive sexual health curriculum used across the country, and he leads the Young Men's Health Project, which helps boys talk openly about relationships, emotion, and responsibility. So, with all that said, please join me in welcoming Joanna and Christopher. Joanna, Christopher, thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for making time for us. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, we are so grateful that these conversations are happening and just honored to be a part of it.
Amazing. Well, we are so grateful. Like we were talking about earlier, before we open up the webinar, we've got a lot of folks in here tonight that really run the gamut from classroom educators. A lot of folks are parents, are direct service providers, counselors. So a lot of people that work with children directly or have kids themselves. So I just am really excited for this conversation, and I feel like people are going to come away with a lot of good ideas, a lot of new ways that they connect with the boys in their lives, and they can go buy your book too, which we'll talk about later. But first, I just want to like start from the beginning. What inspired you to write this book? So there are lots of parenting books or how-to books of like what to do, what not to do, but yours is really different. So what inspired you and what gap were you maybe hoping to fill when you wrote the book?
Yeah, I as a gender studies major and somebody who was, I did a media critique through the lens of gender and parenting. I was so focused on girls for a long time, and then I had two little boys. And I was like, okay, where's the toolkit? Where's the instructions handbook? I've got nothing here. And I knew that I needed a resource that didn't exist. And finally, as my kids got bigger and I was able to observe it and write about it, I thought, man, we need a toolkit. We need an instruction manual. And when I met Christopher and he was a dad and a man himself and an educator running boys groups, I was like, okay, this is what we've got to do. I just knew that it was impossible for me as a writer and an editor to pick up one of these parenting books that goes on and on and on about theory and actually learn something I could do right now while my kid was having whatever problem. I was like, Christopher, we've got to put something together that people can grab, read quickly, and start executing right off the bat.
I came in to this with a journalism degree. So I studied journalism and I went to a school at the University of Missouri that really emphasizes service journalism, that really making things that are useful for people. A lot of people who had worked at the kind of magazines like Good Housekeeping that you would see at the supermarket. So they were coming with that kind of background. And actually, one of my professors liked to say, you wrote a story that's useful if somebody clips it out and sticks it on the refrigerator. Talked about the value of refrigerator journalism. And I really, as a parent and as a teacher, I want to have something that's valuable, but also recognize how scarce people's time is. So like Joanna, like theory is interesting and reading big ideas is interesting, but I know that the reality for most people is they need information that they can use quickly. And really, this book reflects a lot of the conversations that we have with adults in our lives when they come to us and say, "Oh, don't you know something about this? I need some advice about my child who just, I walked in on them and they were looking at X-rated website, or they just told me that they think they might be transgender." Like, big things that come up in the lives of teenagers. And parents then turn around like, who do I know who knows something about this? And they're looking for practical advice about what to do in those situations. So we thought about the framing of those kind of questions and what kind of answers are really useful to people when they need them, and tried to put that into a book and think
Yeah.
about the big questions that people deal with teenage boys right now.
Christopher and I both in our separate worlds became the people that were unshakable. Like people could ask us embarrassing questions or they about things their kids were doing or things they would be ashamed of. And it was interesting meeting him and knowing that he was the same way, where people would be like, I have to tell you something, I don't know what to do. And then being able to be like, guess what? It's common. It's common. And just
Yeah,
relieve people of that burden of feeling like something's wrong with my kid.
exactly. And then not only is it common here, okay, let's break it down. Like, here are some ways that you can talk
Mhm.
about that, where you can actually, and that's what I really love about your book is there are really practical strategies, like literal sentences you can say to open up these conversations with your kids. And I think that, like you said, I just echoing the theory of it is really interesting, and the why behind it is obviously really important. But people need practical tools, and it's just we're so grateful that your book exists and that you two are doing the work that you're doing. Um, so one of the things, like I said, that I love about the book is that, there are these practical strategies, and it really frames it not as this one big talk that you have about these topics, but these sort of like small everyday moments that you can have with your kids or with kids that you're working with. Um, And also like the focus shifts from telling them what to do to like actually having a conversation, being curious, asking questions. So I would love to kind of talk to you all about why you think curiosity is such a powerful tool within this context and like how participants that are here tonight can really push themselves maybe to be more curious with the boys in their lives.
One of the phrases I tried to introduce in the book is get curious, not furious. Because I do notice a lot of parents, you know, feel frustrated, and I, as a parent, sometimes feel frustrated with kids when they're teenagers or in their, they're moving toward being teenagers and they're becoming more independent, and especially around this interaction with that development stage and electronics, I think is where I hear from parents all the time that they're frustrated that their kid won't get off their phone or they're playing video games and they set a time when they were going to be done and then they just blow right past it, or they say, I can't finish now, my game's not over. And the parents don't understand. And they often, the next stage for them is to their emotions get escalated and the parent starts yelling, or gets really angry. I've heard from parents who, you know, grabbed the video game system and took it away physically. And I totally understand that. Like it can be really frustrating. Um, I don't think that's a particularly effective way of parenting. I don't think anybody's their best parent when they're really escalated and their emotions are heightened. So we are sort of encouraging people to take a step back, to be a little bit reflective and be a little bit strategic in how they think about how they deal with teenagers. So trying to figure out what is so compelling about this game? Why do you love it? Why is it so hard to stop? I said dinner was going to be at 7 o'clock and you said you would be ready. And now you're telling me your game went into overtime and you can't stop for another 20 minutes? Like, why is that more important than sitting down with me for a meal? Um, and just really engaging, trying to find out what's going on with the things that they're interested in, which often are electronics, but it could be other things. Just kind of getting to know your kid, being curious about them, and then being strategic with them, engaging them and saying, it's actually important to me that you get your homework done first, or it's important to me that when you set a time that you say you're going to turn this off, that you turn it off. So let's figure out how to make that happen so that you feel satisfied and I'm not angry like I was last night, and we can make a plan together.
You know, it's an interesting thing because when you have a child, you know you don't know everything when you have a baby. So you read about sleep training or you read about breastfeeding and you do the research and the feeding schedule, introducing solids, when they should walk. For some reason, we think that parenting teenagers or talking to teenagers, if you're a mentor or an educator, should just come naturally. And oftentimes that blows up in our faces because our adolescent children have an ability to trigger us uniquely. No matter who you are, there's going to be something that your adolescent child is going to do that pushes your buttons. So the idea with our book was, you know what? You actually were not born to parent tweens and teens perfectly. Let's make a plan ahead of time. And even if your kids are 17 and 19 right now, you can still go back and look at it for ideas because it should be reassuring to hear none of us actually really know how to do this perfectly. Now that we don't live in a village, most of us, where are we going to learn that from?
And what we've noticed is that a lot of people kind of step back from parenting. They're kind of intensely involved when kids are little, and then they take a step back, and that's natural. It's part of the journey of being a parent to, let your children have a little more rope, a little more freedom to go and, do their own thing. But we see people really stepping back from parenting, in a way that isn't working very well, frankly. So we see parents who, often around the age of middle school, they give their kid a phone, um, and they kind of expect that their child is going to manage their own social life from that point on. They say, like, if you want to get together with your friends, you text them, you make a plan. I don't want to be involved with that anymore. Or their child starts to do the totally normal thing that teenagers do, of like pushing them away, closing their door more often, maybe slamming the door. And the parents are like, oh, I guess they don't need me anymore. I guess they don't want me around. and they disengage. And
Mm.
we want to bring a message to adults to say, even if you're getting a slammed door in your face sometimes, you need to keep knocking on that door. You need to keep trying.
Yeah.
Because it is young people, particularly boys, don't have great social skills when they're in that tween and early teenage years. They we don't socialize boys very well to know kind of how to make and maintain good friendships, and how to manage the sort of complex um, aspects of managing a social life don't come easily. You have to actually teach those skills. Um, and so we want parents to keep trying, to keep engaging. Your engagement is going to look different than it did when you had a 4-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old. But it is important to really stay in there. And we talk about some serious things in our book, that things that people need to talk to boys about. They're not going to be appropriate to talk about with an 8-year-old, but they are definitely appropriate and needed to talk to a 16-year-old about.
Yeah.
And if you're picking this up and saying, "Oh, I've never talked to my child about racism or pornography or consent," like those seem really hard to talk about. We made a guide for you. So we're trying to make it easier and trying to say, yes, it's challenging, it might be awkward, but you still need to have these talks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joanna.
Well, I was just going to say, what we've seen with parents of boys around 13 is a lot of engagement with their athletics or whatever their interest is and making sure their grades are up and not a lot of engagement around those soft skills. So when they're 5 or 6 or 7, we do talk to all of our kids, including boys, about, oh, gentle hands with the dog, and your friend's feelings might be hurt when you call him a poopy head or whatever it is when they're little. And then we assume that they've got it figured out by 13. And in reality, oftentimes they've got it less figured out at 13 because their world is changing so dramatically. And then we give them a tool to access the entire universe in their hands. So, ultimately, just like we would want to teach them how to throw a curveball in baseball, we need to be able to teach them, hey, have you texted your friend so and so lately? How's he doing? Oh, you guys had a fight. Tell me about it. Or, oh, he's annoying you lately. Let's talk about it. Like that's a bummer. I know that feeling. And just talking about friendships as much as we might talk about, the penalty kick.
Yeah, I love that. I also love, there were a lot of questions that folks submitted that were basically like, how do I talk to my teenager that like doesn't want to talk to me? They're really shutting me out. They're kind of shutting down. How do I continue to try to
Yeah.
engage them?
Well, if a direct answer is if this is just starting, there are a few things we ask parents and ourselves to look at, which is, are we doing it on our own time or are we doing it on their time? Are we trying to talk to them, connect on our time, like 7 p.m. after dinner when maybe they've just done hours of homework and practice and whatever else it was? Or are we waiting till they're giving us signals that it's time to talk? When
Mhm.
they start putting out those bids for attention, sometimes those bids are uncomfortable. They may be crabby. They may be huffing and puffing, that exasperated sigh. They may shut the door a little bit hard. Those things to adults are, I'm going to leave that person alone. But to our child, it may be, hey, I need to connect and I don't know how to ask for that. And are we connecting with them on things that are of interest to them? Christopher mentioned this earlier. You may love baseball, your kid may like musical theater. You may think they love baseball, and maybe they haven't thought about baseball in a year. You may think you need to sit down and talk to them about sex and consent for an hour, and this is a child who hasn't had a serious or connected emotional conversation with you in 6 months. And in that time, he or she may start wondering, well, what does my parent think of me? So try to go to them on their schedule. Let them know you care and you're concerned without making a big deal out of it. Oftentimes it helps to get moving. Ask them to take a walk with you. Ask them for help bundling, putting leaves in the bin. Something where you're moving together, cooking a meal together, see if they want to learn how to knit with you. Whatever your interest is, get moving, move your hands, move your body, and then you can just ask a simple question. What's new? What's going on at school? Has anything changed in the last year? Asking questions that aren't like, are you depressed? And then if they continue shutting you out and you have tried and tried and tried, then maybe it is, we always recommend people seek out a therapist or school counselor. But start by trying to figure out who they are and what they would actually like from you instead of trying to impose your will on this tiny little almost adult, or not so tiny.
We take a lot of lessons in the book from reading relationship experts and talking to relationship experts and people who actually give counseling to couples who are trying to make their relationships, their romantic relationships work better. And so that's where this idea of bids for connection comes from. And we have been encouraging parents to really be attentive to what your child's doing. So the idea of a bid for connection is like, oh, they're open to having a conversation. They're sort of giving you a clue. And like Joanna said, it might seem obnoxious even. It may not seem subtle. It might be, if you've got a kid who's really into music, you're paying attention to, oh, they put on a different song than what they usually play. And maybe that's a way that they're connecting with the world. They're letting you know how they're feeling is by changing the music they're listening to. Sometimes it's things like a kid who's hanging out in the living room or the kitchen a little bit longer than they usually do. And you're sort of noticing, like, hey, what's going on? And giving them space. And often it's around timing. So we talked about your own time versus their time. Often their time comes late at night when you're ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden, this kid who's been sullen all day or hasn't wanted to talk to you, all of a sudden they become a chatterbox and really want to tell you everything that's going on. And we encourage people to pay attention to that. And if you can, to actually let those conversations happen. Because I know both Joanna and I have had some of the best conversations with young people happen when we're ready to go to bed.
Yep.
And it is, not the most convenient time, but sometimes is the time that's available and the time when the kid has processed through whatever they need to get through in the day and they finally can take a breath and say, okay, let me tell you what's going on.
And I think by now, most of us who've been paying attention know that their circadian rhythms change in adolescence. We think they're lazy when they sleep till noon. We think they've had too much caffeine when they're awake until midnight. This is actually totally developmentally, physiologically normal for young people. I know some parents are like, you know what? I'm offended that he waited until 9:30 at night when I'm trying to watch my whatever and he comes in. Well, you can be offended by it, but it's actually natural. And by being upset that he didn't come to you at 9 a.m. that day, you could be pushing away your opportunity to connect with this kid. And ultimately, those connections build their trust in us.
Yeah. There was something in your book that I was just rereading in prep, and it was basically like a reminder to parents, your children are not an extension of you. They are their own people. Um, and I think something else that I really love is within the book, there are quotes, literally, like all of the sections have quotes from actual real live boys and young men about, these different topics. And one that really stood out to me was I think the question that he was asked was, what could your parents do differently that would make you more likely to talk openly with them? And so this was James, who's 21. And he said, it would be good if maybe they were more open about their struggles and hardships at my age. Without that, there is a kind of family myth, as my therapist likes to call it, about how my parents made it to where they are. If they opened up about their struggles, it might make it easier for me to open up. And I really loved that of like this thing that, as a call to parents that might be hesitant about sharing their own mistakes or their own sort of struggles with the kids in their lives, that not only can they be honest with them about it, it's actually going to be helpful and really serve them in creating that connection and maybe opening up a lot of these uncomfortable conversations that they might not be quite sure how to have.
Yeah, and we want to do that in age appropriate way. You know, as Dr. Cara Natterson says, if you should answer your kids' questions honestly, but you don't need to give them all of the details right away. So, you know, your 11-year-old might ask if you ever smoked cigarettes. You need to think about how you're going to answer that. Did you have sex before you were married? Did you ever just hook up and have a one-night stand? Did you ever try drugs? Start thinking it through right now because they're going to ask you, and you don't want to lie to them, but also they don't need all the information right away. Like, oh, so part of this conversation is for when you're a little bit older, but I'll tell you right now, I did try cigarettes, and here's what my experience was. Whatever it is you feel comfortable with. But regardless, having a plan for how to have those tough conversations goes a long way. And you know that you mentioned James. James was the oldest participant in our survey. And we learned so much from the boys that were, say, 18 to 21 because they're still close enough to having been little boys that they remember it. But they have that wisdom of looking back. Like we have the experts that we cited, we have the Gottmans and the people who invented Imago and Stan, all these famous people. And then we have these other experts, which are these amazing boys and young men. This is probably my favorite part of the book.
I think it's really interesting to this question about stories because this comes up. I'm a health educator, health teacher, and it comes up a lot in classrooms. People are teaching about drugs or they're teaching about relationships and sexuality in a classroom setting, and students raise their hand and they want to know about the teacher's life, and say, "Oh, you're teaching us about drugs. Did you ever do drugs?" And so it comes up a lot, and I do coaching with teachers about how to answer those questions. And Joanna's exactly right. Like you don't have to share your biography, and it's actually not appropriate a lot of times to share a lot of stories from your life. But I think the most valuable thing you can share is that not everything's been easy. And this idea sometimes young people will look at an adult, particularly an adult who's accomplished and has done a lot in their life, and they have trouble seeing the path from where they are in their life to how to get to someplace like where this person they're looking up to is in their life. So helping them see the steps along the way, which often involve some stumbles and involve some setbacks and overcoming difficulty. That is really useful for young people to hear and to understand that not everything comes in a linear path. Not everything makes sense along the way, and sharing some limited information if they're asking specific questions about your behavior in a home setting. I think there can be a case for sharing some of that in a limited way. But you're in charge of how much you share. And it is also totally appropriate to have boundaries and say, that's not something I'm really comfortable talking about right now.
Yeah, and you know, you said a lot of people ask questions about how to get them to talk, and I want people who are listening right now to have some tools. So I'll just do a quick little rundown of tools that it can be tempting. This is just one example. You can adapt it if you're in a classroom setting or a clinical setting, obviously. But as a parent, I'll give a parenting example. You're knocking on their door, and instead of just barging in, and when they say, yeah, and you look in, they have their phone in front of them. Instead of assuming that they're doing nothing, that they're playing a game or they're just scrolling social media, ask, hey, are you busy right now? I wanted to talk to you about something really quickly. So we're showing them some respect by honoring their time and their energy. And you observe their response. And if they seem exhausted and overwhelmed, you can say, it's kind of serious. So do you want to wait till after dinner? Again, respecting their emotional response. They may be like, oh no, I'm not tired. I totally want to hear it. Or if it's not serious, you know what? It's not serious. This will just take 1 minute. So you're prepping them for what the conversation is going to be. This seems obvious because this is something we do with our colleagues and our friends every day. It is not obvious when you're talking to your own child because, like Christopher mentioned, or maybe it was you, we see them as extension of ourselves, but they're not. So that simple tool of, hey, what are you up to? Do you have a minute to talk about something? And then prepping them for what the topic will be. It'll be light, it'll be serious. This is just about planning, giving them a sense. And then also, if you can give them a sense of how long the conversation is going to be, this will take 5 minutes. you know what, this is kind of a big conversation because I heard some bad news from your principal today. Let me know when you have a minute. Respecting their energy goes a long way, and it teaches them to respect other people's energy too.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and that's modeling for them too. Like how to approach communication about potentially difficult subjects or, tricky subjects
Yeah.
or, respecting that someone else might not want to talk about what they want to talk about right at that moment. Yeah, I love that. And I love too about um you were saying, we might go into the room and see that he's got his face in his phone and we automatically assume, oh, that's not important. Like he's just,
Mhm.
scrolling social media or whatever. He could be doing any number of things. I love that in the book. You were like, he could be preparing, looking at his schedule, preparing for homework for the next day. We don't know.
He could
Um,
be emotionally supporting a friend who's in a crisis.
right. Yeah.
I recently discovered my son makes flashcards on an app on his phone, and he studies on his phone, flipping through the flashcards. I thought he was on social media.
Yeah. I I love that. Just that sort of like taking a moment to give them that respect as another person. So I'm going to segue, and I know that I just said, it doesn't always mean that they're scrolling on their phones on social media, but they are living a lot of their lives online, right? And this is a huge topic. For a lot of folks ask questions about this, but it's also something that obviously we see coming up a lot. It's coming up a lot in national discourse as well about um, what kids are seeing online, how they're engaging with things online, and how a lot of folks want to know how can we stop them from, being unsafe online? How can we stop them from seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing online? I'll leave that there and maybe ask for what's your response to folks that might say, how do we stop them from doing this?
Well, one of the worries that I have about social media is a little bit less about what people might see online, but it's about time and about how much time people are spending by themselves with electronics or maybe connecting with people online, but they're essentially alone in their room, in their house. And I do think we need to keep talking about what are the actual things that kids are looking at on their screens and what influence is that having. That is one conversation that we need to be paying attention to. I don't think it's reasonable to think that we're going to completely change the world and have no screens in young people's lives. So we do need to do some preparation for like what does the world look like? What kind of things might you encounter? And recognize that um, young people or any people who are going online may see things that they wish they didn't see. They may see violent imagery, they may see um, sexual imagery or things that don't make sense to them, that are, complex world situations. So our job as adults is to help guide through all those things. But I also think one of the things we can do to help mediate that is to just make sure that young people are having time where they are in person with other people, that they are actually hanging out and really, this is one of the statistics that's really stood out to me in doing research around this is the amount of time that young people hang out with one another has gone down tremendously over the last 20 years. The amount of dating that teenagers say they are doing has gone down tremendously. And that concerns me because you learn so much from being around other people and interacting with other people in real life. And we don't have technology that can replace that fully. Um, we can connect with other people online, but it's not the same experience as hanging out with people, particularly that kind of teenage hanging out where you don't have an agenda, you're just being together
Yep.
and seeing how things go and having experiences together. And I really want to make sure that our young people have as much of that kind of experience as they can.
Yeah, I always think about the movie Say Anything when I think about the teenage life that I grew up in, where it's something that's unfamiliar to our kids, too many of our kids. You can watch that movie with them and it's like it's Lloyd and his two female friends and they're just playing guitars and laying around. And you can talk to your teenager like, this is what my life was like, and here's why I think this is valuable. Media is a great way to start conversations. That movie, there's lots of negatives and positives to it, but what was the relationship model? And like all the guys that hang out behind the gas and sip on a Friday night, that was not as healthy of an environment. But that was a normal teenage experience. And like these online relationships, there's nothing wrong with them. What's wrong is when when they are in lieu of real in life friendships, when they take the place of them connecting and being bored and finding something to do. And a lot of times being bored and doing nothing or skateboarding or whatever it is leads them to have deeper, more connected conversations with each other because they are then disarmed. And that connection with other people, your own peers, it's irreplaceable.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I think also, something that we talk about a lot in our programs is and we get people asking us like, well, how can we, you know, keep kids from seeing things that they shouldn't see online, or how can we? And our answer is there's there is no fail-safe foolproof way that you're going to be able to protect them from everything that's happening online. What you do need to do is have conversations with them about what they're seeing. So,
Yeah.
we see a lot of conversations about like bro culture, things that are happening online, Andrew Tate, um, and this idea that some sort of like parent monitor on their social media profile is going to keep them from the algorithm feeding that to them, which
Right.
is not how the algorithm is built. The algorithm doesn't care. Um, but having those conversations, having an adult in their lives that's willing to have those tough conversations
Yeah.
with them, I think that is the protective factor. That is the thing that's going to make a difference. And Gianna, I know that, this sort of radicalization piece, this online radicalization piece is something that you have a lot of experience with. I
Yeah.
would love if you wanted to maybe talk about that a little bit and maybe what you learned and what your takeaways from that were.
We just had a conversation, actually, it might have just been me, with a parent at one of our in-person events, where he was saying, my kids are not going to see that stuff online. And I said, well, respectfully, I'm so with you about parental control software. I personally used Bark with my kids when they were young. I'm not endorsing it. I don't know if it's still as good as it was at one point. I think having a monitoring or a safety software is great. But I think you also want to have a bit of a safety net underneath there, which is um, preparing them for what they might see that might be inappropriate, not just adult images, but also people saying things that harm other people, not just bullying among young people that you know, but also racist, sexist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, whatever it is. Those people are out there and they're putting out content that will be very appealing, even to you, a person that I know would never want to hurt somebody. So those
Yeah.
kinds of tools and skills. I also love the idea of soft launching social media with kids. I like the idea of, even with my 7-year-old, we look at my Instagram together on my phone. We look up puppy videos and kitty videos. And I talk to her, this looks like AI. I don't want to click on this. Or this looks like a weird skin rash. I'm not going to click on this. Like just telling her my thought process. Okay, this looks like a real puppy. Let's click on it. And then if something goes strange, and I'll say, you know what, I'm going to scroll away from this because I didn't like the direction this was going. That is one way to soft launch. I also like the idea of giving them an Instagram account on your own device that you log into, that you monitor when they're young, giving them some skills, giving them some exposure, look at it with them together. And just like driving a car, you don't just hand them the keys to the sports car. You're with them, you're driving, it starts raining and you pop them in the car so they can practice driving in the rain. Soft launch social media with your kids, and then they get more and more access as they get older. and explain to them, we have a monitoring or a protective system on our Wi-Fi to help keep you safe, but also to let you know how important it is to us that you are safe online, and so that you know what the rules are in the house. And some young people might try to hack to get around it. They might set up it's a system so that they aren't being monitored. I might not be able to control that, but I'll tell you that that is against the rules in our house, and here will be the consequences for that. So recognizing they might get around it, they might see it on their friend's phone, and letting them know anything you want to talk to me about that you've seen online, I will never be mad. Never. I will not take your device away because you saw something online. Because that's their biggest fear. They saw, I accidentally found adult content. If I tell my mom, I'm going to get my tablet taken away. Set it out, lay that out first before you hand it to them so that they know the rules, and they also know that they're safe coming to you to talk about it.
One thing that I think we have to pay a lot of attention to are jokes and memes. It is sometimes they're even labeled like I've seen something coming up in my teenager's feed where it's just accounts that give you the most offensive memes, and they're meant to be funny, but they're essentially racist jokes or
Yeah.
jokes that are making fun of disabled people, and or things where people are look like they're being hurt, and you're supposed to laugh at them, and sometimes they're labeled that clearly, like, we're definitely not going to watch most offensive memes, but sometimes they're
Yeah.
not labeled that way.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just jokes like, oh, this is so funny. And teenagers love funny stuff and want to laugh with one another. But it's having those conversations about like, how do you think it would feel to, if other people knew you were laughing at
Yep.
this, would you be proud about that? Why do you think this is funny? Talking to them, and you don't have to be, you want to ride a line where you're engaging them in conversation, but not making them feel ashamed.
Yes.
And it's a skill that you can practice. And it's a little bit, you kind of got to be in there with them a little bit and say like, I totally get why you laughed at that, but it's not my favorite kind of joke because the person being the person they're making fun of seems like they maybe were really hurt, or if somebody had heard me telling that joke, I don't think that like my boss would be happy with me if they heard somebody at my work telling a joke like that. And I want you to be ready for the world where you're going to be working with lots of people, and I don't want you making fun of them.
And also, one thing that I discovered years ago when I was reporting on extremist recruiting of white teenage boys was that too many parents never distinguished between a hurtful word and a bad word, a naughty word. So your kid knows he cannot say the F word in front of his little sister, right? That's a naughty word, right? But he goes out with his friends and nobody's offended. They're all saying the F word, right? But what about the N word? What about any sort of racist or bigoted slur? Have you made the distinction to your kid? The F word is rude, the N word is hurtful and scary to some people. And we don't want to make somebody else feel that way, right? Like you get the distinction so that they can hear a word and maybe even come to you and say, is this a bad word or is this a cruel word? Is this a harmful word? Too many parents were not making that distinction. So their kids were lured in because those swear words only go so far. And if you are thrilled and delighted by shock value, which adolescent brains are kind of wired to be, then you're going to push that far. You're going to push it as far as you can, and you're going to assume it's harmless because it's everywhere on their feeds until someone tells you, here is the harm, here's where it's coming from. Let's talk together about why this person, why this account or this group wants you to see this content.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also, building those skills for empathy of like thinking about how this word that maybe is a word to me that I saw somewhere, that I heard somewhere that was shocking, um, what that is, what that actually means for the people that it affects, how it affects them, how it makes them feel. Yeah, I mean, what you just said about teenage brains being sort of wired for that shock value. I don't know. I would
Yeah,
love for you
so
to like
Dr.
kind of talk more about that.
A lot of people who are watching this have probably read one book by Dr. Dan Siegel. He writes with Tina Payne Bryson. They have best-selling parenting books. He, in his research into the teenage brain, has explained that their dopamine levels. So if a grown-up's dopamine levels are kind of like up and down, up and down. We talk about dopamine in a very non-scientific way all the time in society right now. So hopefully we're all on the same page. It's kind of a reward, risk-taking and reward system. Um, so a teenager will have higher dopamine spikes from a pleasurable or thrilling experience, and then lower lows. So oftentimes when they're in that trough, in that valley, they will, this is all subconscious. They don't know that. They're not doing it on purpose. They will look for something to perk them up again because, man, that feels so good when it's going up, right? And then it goes back down. So we talk about moodiness and hormones. It may not even be, puberty hormones. It may be brain chemicals, maybe brain chemistry that makes them a little bit moody. So knowing that about our kids, Dr. Dan Siegel, again, he talked about going to the UCLA parking lots and putting on helmets and elbow guards and padded gloves and bombing down the parking lot on skateboards with his teenage son together because he knew that this child needed to do something dangerous. He could sense it in his child. So instead of driving drunk or looking at terrible content online, he helped him get that energy out. And it's brain science. It's not a character fault. It's not disrespect, and it's not, it's not a defect. It's just their reality. And not all kids are like this. We all have known a teenager that is not a risk taker. That's a wonderful teenager also. But embracing this reality helps us understand how they get lured into stuff, both online and in real life. My kids liked to know the brain chemistry. My
Yeah.
older boys who are now grown up, they liked it when I said, here's what your brain might be doing, and reading to them passages from Dan Siegel's research and reporting. And they'd be like, oh, that makes sense. Or talking about addiction in a brain chemistry way. Not all kids are like that, but that is a tool for the kid that likes to get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, we actually have that. That's in some of our programs as well. We like literally talk about neuroplasticity and like how
Yeah.
their brains are so plastic and like everybody's brains are plastic, but kids' brains are like especially
Yeah.
plastic and they can like rewire new pathways
Hmm.
and it is sort of this entry into like behavior change or sort
Hmm.
of rerouting or thinking about, potentially harmful behavior since our
Well, as you
programs.
know, that's the foundation of our book, is we believe that growing empathy through conversation and connection can actually help teenagers make better decisions on their own as well. Dan Siegel, again, referencing wonderful Dan Siegel, he calls it mind sight tools. We have a lot of different ones in our book as well. Expanding on that, asking them to think globally actually moves a lot of their brain activity into those logical, rational, prefrontal cortex areas of the brain. Like you hear people say, well, their prefrontal cortexes don't develop until they're 25. That's not true. Their prefrontal cortexes are developing. And speaking of neuroplasticity, we can help them develop and help them grow or activate those parts of their brain by asking them to think about things with us.
One of the theories about why this dopamine is levels are different with teenagers is actually kind of to encourage them to take a step out of their house or out of their village and find the thing or the things that really make them happy in life, that are really satisfying, and to meet new people, to go and meet some people who are not already living in your house, and because that feels exciting when you're a teenager, when you're a young person, in a way that maybe doesn't feel as exciting when you're 40 years old. And learning new things, your brain when you're a teenager is like it can learn new things really quickly, and your brain is really set up for learning and taking in new information. You can discover things, and it's a time in your life when really your biology is sort of set up to help you find what's going to make you fascinated, what's going to be really interesting to you, and that can help you figure out your life path. and help you figure out
Mm.
what kind of people you really connect with and who you want to spend your time with. So those are the things that need to be in the mix of a teenager's life, how they're spending their days, spending time around other people, having lots of experiences, and figuring out what kind of things do you love.
Yeah, and
I love that.
we were honored to get to talk to the very famous biological anthropologist, Dr. Helen Fisher, before she passed away. And she kind of laughingly told us, if you're a person that likes to know the why behind things, that, if you imagine a village when human brains and cultures were developing, if a child didn't have a push to go away from their village, we wouldn't have any genetic diversity. We would just, I would make a joke about, the British Empire, but this idea of the healthier genes coming in and being processed is when our kids push away from us. They are not supposed to necessarily want to be with us 24/7 when they are 17 years old. There is a reason that may be driving them to go experience the world. And we can't let online culture be the only way that they experience that.
Yes. I'm gonna just take a quick pause and say, drop your if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box. We're like about 6 or 7 minutes from the end here, but I want to give people a chance to drop your questions in. We're gonna carry on talking, but just drop them in if you've got them. Sorry, Christopher, you were about to say something. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if we should take some questions from the audience. So you're on it.
Look at that. I read your mind. Yeah, please feel free to drop some questions in. And a lot of these questions that we've been talking about tonight were actually like pre-submitted audience questions as well. And one thing that actually a lot of folks, because we have a lot of teachers in here, asked about is what you guys were just talking about was that like connecting to a sense of purpose, like helping boys feel motivated. And a lot of them were asking that sort of from an educator's point of view. And I think what you just said, both of you just said, but what you said, Christopher, specifically was like, what are they interested? What are their what are they passionate about? And like giving them more opportunities to discover new things. As an educator, how do you like, how do you approach motivating boys that might be a little less motivated than others?
Well, I think it is good to follow their lead and be let them be interested in things, and they may change. They might get interested in coin collecting, and then after 6 months they're like, oh, that's boring. No, I'm into Pokemon. Um, and but to try and not dismiss that, like be interested in it as much as they're interested in it. Um, but one thing that I think educators can do is to make it safe for boys to like things that may be perceived as feminine or girly, or they're not sure if they're allowed to like them. So letting sort of having a full range of activities be acceptable for things that boys can like and things that boys can do. So a lot of boys say that they're afraid to say to dance or to sing or to like certain colors because they think that people might call them gay or might say that that's not a manly thing to like. Sometimes that comes from their own families, those restrictions and those messages. So really making sure that it's safe for people to like what they like and to not have and to even if it's not something that's coded as masculine or manly, it's fine.
Mhm.
You can be into that. Um, and then we actually really need in our society, we really need some men to be teachers, social workers, to work in helping professions. So, in the same way that we've had big campaigns to get girls to go into STEM careers and become scientists and go into computer science and technology-based careers, I would love to see adults actively encouraging boys to think about careers where they're helping other people. So you could become a teacher, you could spend your day, you could become a coach, you could spend your day helping people get through their problems. You can spend your day caring for little kids. You could be an early child care educator and work with 4-year-olds. And that's a totally acceptable career for a man to do. And kind of
Mhm.
sharing that message over and over and saying there's good jobs in these fields and it would be great if there's more men in those jobs and we need men to go into jobs where they're caring for other people is an important part of our society and how we can grow.
Mm. I love that expansive, really expansive view of what is masculinity, you know. I really love that and that redefining of masculinity. Um, so we have a couple questions in here that are pretty similar and kind of piggyback off of this about how to motivate or how to talk to boys when they're showing a lack of motivation in school or feeling like how to talk to them about, this person says, applying themselves, which I sort of I interpret to mean like applying themselves educationally or towards some sort of life purpose or greater purpose. Do y'all have any ideas on that?
You know, one area that I'd like to emphasize is that I believe so many parents, especially the ones who are buying and reading our books, are in a very high achiever mindset that there's one way to do things, that my kid is going to go to high school, he's going to go to college, he's going to find his profession and go out into the world. And that is a story that makes us feel good and often validates us as parents, but may not be your child's path. And oftentimes we talk about vocational schools or trade schools or any of those things, and we think that's great for other people's kids, right? And actually, that sometimes becomes racialized. A lot of times, if you're talking about trade schools and you're picturing Black and brown children, check yourself. But all of our children can benefit from exploring a different educational path. Just because you took all the APs or you wished you had taken all the APs doesn't mean it's necessarily right for your kids. And sometimes they shut down academically and start to dislike school because you've dictated what their educational path will look like. You can open it up. You can even look for a school where maybe the focus will be on hospitality training or auto mechanics. If those resources are there and that's what your kid brightens up to, that's good. And if it feels yucky to you, that might be something that you as a parent can re-examine about your own biases. It's also okay for kids to get C's. I know this is an unpopular take. The educators here, I think, will agree with me, but the parents are like, no, it's not. It's not okay. It is okay for a child to bring home a C. It's okay for them to do their best, but have that best look like studying for an hour instead of studying for 4 hours. Just because that's what you did or what your older kid or what Bobby down the street does, not every kid needs to do that.
We had a lot
Yeah.
of boys in our who we interviewed for our book talking about school and how school just felt boring to them. And one of the things that they talked about most often is how long you have to sit, how long you have to sit still. And they wished for more physical movement. And there are schools that do things differently. So if you are working with a kid who is saying that school is really boring and they wish they moved around more and they wish they could get up and do more hands-on activities, um, it is not bad to incorporate that feedback. And maybe it's looking for another school, maybe it's looking for some activities that you can bring in on the weekends or after school. But this idea of helping people find their passion and find their motivation is really important.
Mhm.
And I worry about kids who get so turned off by school and have the sense like that education is boring, um, that they kind of check out and say school's not for me. And we see this happening a lot with boys who are just choosing not to go to college, or they start college and they don't finish. Um, so
Or that
thinking
just
about,
trail off around after ninth or 10th grade. We've seen it
yeah.
so much where all of a sudden they can drive and they can have a job. And it's like, why would I be here? And at that point, the conversation, as Christopher is saying, and as he writes in the book, yeah, we really want you here. And here's the benefit of getting a high school degree. But maybe for that child, there's a way to do it where he won't feel, a lot of times they feel a lot of shame when they're not doing it the way that other people want them to do it. How can we adapt?
And for people who are teachers or administrators, these are also things that we can change. Like school doesn't have to be one way. And I would definitely encourage us to shake things up and think about how could we have a school where people are not complaining about how long they have to sit still all day long, and how could it be a different kind of experience?
Yeah, rethinking the sort of that sort of paradigm, right? Um, so I'm aware of time, and I want to just ask you all one last question to sort of wrap this up. Basically, if you could, if the folks that are here tonight, if they could sort of leave with one piece of advice, if you could leave them with one thing that they could start doing tomorrow, what would it be?
That's so hard. Christopher, do you have any thoughts?
Um, what I really want people to remember is that teenagers are fun and interesting. And one of the ways you can or start or continue to have a good relationship with teenagers is to just go in with a positive mindset, like, hey, this is going to be fun that we get to hang out this weekend. And I think so often people kind of get in their heads and they worry, like, oh my gosh, my kid's going to be a teenager, and they're really dreading it. Um, be open to the possibility that it might be great. It might be your favorite time of your favorite sort of stage of parenting is to parent teenagers, and that it opens up a whole bunch of possibilities, and it can be a blast. So be open to that possibility.
And be open to them being who they are. They're going to grow up and probably be different from you, and that's awesome. That's my favorite part. I love when my kids or the boys we're working with say something that I'm like, I never thought of it that way. It's amazing.
I love that. What a beautiful note to end on. So I just want to thank you both so much. I feel like I could just talk to you for hours and hours more. I just want to thank you so much for being here tonight. I want to thank you for your book. Everybody who's here, I'm going to drop the link to their website in the chat. Please go buy their book. It's really good. It's really thoughtful and is practically appropriate, and it's going to help you with a lot of these conversations that you're having and a lot of the questions that you asked. So thank you all the participants for being here tonight. Joanna and Christopher, thank you so much for being here with us. Are there any other things that you all want to plug or let us know about?
If people are interested in the book, and right now it is only in hardcover, there is an Audible version that I think is on sale. And I think the ebook is actually, after a month, they drop the prices. I don't know what they're doing exactly, but this is a great time to grab one of those versions if the hardcover feels a little hefty.
Yeah,
And Joanna and I both have newsletters on Substack if you want to keep up with things. Joanna's is called Zooming Out, and mine is called Teen Health Today. And you're invited to subscribe to those. And if you want to keep up with things, we will send out. You'll get emails from us regularly.
amazing. Well, thank you all. So you can find all that information at their website, which I just dropped in the chat. I'm also going to send out a follow-up to everybody, probably end of the week sometime, with all of this information too, links to buy the book, links to their Substacks and their blogs and their websites and everywhere that you can see what they're doing and the incredible work that they are doing. But I want to thank you both again so much for being with us. Thank you everyone who was here tonight, and I hope you all have a beautiful afternoon and evening.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.